Welcome to Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn Group. We talk about everything contingent, the gig economy, and the future of work. And I've got a really interesting topic today that I've had a lot of inquiries about and had a lot of conversations about. And the topic is how to manage your flexible workforce within utilizing technology and centralized, technology platforms versus disparate systems, spreadsheets, and service providers. And so I've got kind of the king of this as our expert today, Glenn Laumeister from AllWork. He's the CEO of AllWork. And, in talking to Glenn about this, he's been a tech executive and a CEO of a number of technology companies over the years. And then in hiring freelancers and contractors in the past, really got frustrated with how it was such disparate systems and it was difficult and no standardization in process. And so over the last 10 years, he's been perfecting this model with his company as the CEO of AllWork. And so, Glenn, thank you for taking the time to talk to me about this topic today because it's more relevant than ever, even though, we hear statistics that, oh, everybody's centralized and running programs through MSPs and different ways. And quite honestly, there's lots of change happening in how things are managed. And more of the workforce is choosing to be on contractor and contingent working arrangements. And your company is starting to perfect that, helping them manage that. So thank you for taking the time out of your schedule today to talk to me about this.
Thanks, Jeff. It's great to be here.
So, in the preamble, I've talked about the growth of the contingent workforce and this kind of change that companies are looking for more flexible workforce, workers are looking for more flexible work arrangements, and then, you know, it creates a totally different way of managing this type of talent. And it's complex. There has never been, great, like it always happens in multiple systems and different ways. And so why is this, and I think I'm answering some of the question because it's the growth in this, but why is this such an important topic today to talk about centralizing it and utilizing technology to really centralize this?
Yeah, so what we've seen in the last 10 years is a couple trends. In addition to that growth that you're talking about, which is real, it's also the type of growth. So there's growth not just in, let's say, the lower paid people or the, lower wage rates. It's all over the map. It's all incomes, all job descriptions. And what's really changed in my mind as we've been talking to customers for many, many years is kind of now a recognition that, hey, I have all this great software to manage my full-time internal workforces.
Yeah.
I've got Workday, I've got Oracle, I've got PeopleSoft, I've got ones for smaller companies as well. And just to give you a fun fact, I was Googling top HCM systems and I got a list of the top 500. So that's just the top 500. There's many more, right? So, and if you look at the top 500, like literally 10 are designed for the contingent workforce. And of those 10, about six are actually sourcing marketplaces, talent marketplaces like an Upwork or a Fiverr,
Yeah.
which don't really apply. So if you look at that and you say from a technology view, there's been a huge underinvestment in software and platforms to help companies manage this contingent workforce. And it kind of got to a breaking point in COVID. So I think that's what we've seen is like it was a problem, it was an irritant, it was like painful, but it wasn't acute until COVID. And then COVID happened, companies started to make a lot more people contingent, and they had to do that for a lot of reasons. And then also a lot of CEOs said, man, I don't know how to plan for the future when stuff like COVID happens. So I want more flexibility in how I spend my labor dollars, so I can react to these shocks much faster. And so that kind of woke people up. And they said, okay, HR person, we have 50 contingent, I want to make it 500. And the HR person's like, well, how am I going to manage that? I don't have any system to do that. I don't have any partners to do that. I don't understand the compliance. I don't know how I'm going to onboard all these people. We do it by hand now. So all of these things just became sort of exponentially harder during COVID and also more important. And so what we've seen is that idea from the C level, like saying, this is more important than ever. We need to address it. And the first thing that a smart company does is they say, who can help me with this problem? Who can provide the technology? Who can provide the services? Let me go out there and look for a solution. And that's what we've seen is a lot of new inquiries for people saying, I don't really know what this solution is called, but I know I'm looking for a better way to manage and pay this contingent workforce.
Yeah. And it's not a new topic because we've both been in the industry for
Right,
a good time, a long time, but it been traditionally more service oriented,
right.
right?
That's right. That's
When
right.
it came to it versus technology oriented, which is allowing customers to do it themselves, right? More and more.
That's a big fork in the road. So when you had this problem in the past, what did you do? You went to a staffing agency,
Yeah.
right? And that if you think about it, Kelly, what's his name? I think his name is John Kelly, invented the temporary staffing
Yeah.
industry like 60 years ago. And so that was what you did. You went to a staffing agency, a temp agency, and they helped you with that. But now with technology throughout the enterprise being sort of the first way that you solve a problem, that was missing in this area. And so it's no longer like I want to go to a staffing agency and have them help me. I want to have technology, and I may include a staffing agency for some parts of it, but I want to control the data. I want to have real-time visibility into the data. I don't want it being in the staffing agency's database or in their cloud. I want it in my cloud. So that's the idea of like technology first is what's really changed.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because, I when you look at it, a lot of companies use their employment brand and they're capable of finding the resources in a lot
That's
of
right.
cases. I don't want to
Right.
say 100%, but in a lot of cases, they're starting to not only starting to have been able to find the resources that they're needing, they're just looking for a solution to make sure that they streamline that onboarding to payment and then the regulations and compliance around the workforce there. And once again, like you say, it went to a service provider, typically either your staffing agency or, as things have matured to an EOR, which is essentially just does the back office of what a staffing agency does in terms of employing people. But it was really a service more than a tech play that made it self-service, right? And
That's right.
when did you see this start to change? And the inquiries that came forward with saying, "Hey, listen, we need a technology to management."
Yeah, I think with what we've seen is that prior to COVID, you had certain areas where they use a lot of freelancers, consultants, contractors, and they had a understanding of the EOR model, pros and cons, and staffing. And for a lot of the companies in middle markets, they don't want to use an MSP. They don't have an MSP. Within the larger companies, they have MSPs and VMSs set up, but they don't use them for all of their use cases. So you had these pockets that were sort of established of, let's say, the history of temporary workers. We do a lot in retail. There's a lot of temporary workers obviously used for the holidays and the peak seasons. Healthcare, you have the same thing, traveling nurses and all of that. So you had these pockets that were established. What we saw after COVID was everybody talking about it, everyone trying to figure it out. Everyone saying, how do we adapt to this flexible world that we live in? And it was really interesting because in the beginning, I sort of thought, okay, this is being driven by cost savings by the CFO or the CEOs of the companies. And that's true. But what was also happening, and we heard from our customers and our prospects, was I can't find enough full-time people. I've got to tap into this flexible workforce because that's the only way I can get enough people to work in my stores, to work in my distribution center, whatever it might be. And that was being driven by the preferences of the talent. The talent was saying, I don't want to work 40 hours a week. I can't do that. I want to work 15 or 20, or I only want to work for 3 months and I want to go back to school. And so the talent was really putting pressure on the employers to figure out a way to improve that work arrangement so there's less friction. And really, that's not going to change. The way the workforce is developing, these companies have to tap into the flexible labor pool.
Yeah. And in terms of kind of that ideal customer that can look at utilizing a technology platform versus needing that extra hand in supporting, right? The services companies that are in the market either today or have been traditionally what had been used. What have you seen? What are you seeing, right? As kind of the customers that are finding success in doing it themselves by utilizing technology versus saying, hey, listen, I'm not capable of doing this. I don't have the resources to do it or the understanding of how to do it. And so I'm gonna outsource it to a service provider who may or may not have technology, right? What are some of the ones that you're seeing success with, and why are they having success by using technology under their own management? And why are they asking for that too, right? Is their
Yeah,
motivation?
great question. So what we look for in that ideal customer is someone that there's a couple qualities. One is being data driven. So what they're looking for is more data. And that usually comes from the fact that they're spending quite a bit of money on this flexible labor. And so they tend to be data driven companies. And Amazon's a good example, right? They're very data driven about everything they do. And obviously they're huge. And that's not necessarily our ideal customer. They're so large. But for an ideal customer that is in the business of making smart data driven decisions, and they don't have the data now, either because it's siloed in their organization. It's on different people's laptops and it's not in any one report the CFO can find, or the data is in a service provider's database and they don't have any access to it all. They have to ask for reports and they don't have the ability to just run their own reports. So it's that idea that, it's a strategic spend for that company. It's enough money for them that it's worth analyzing. So they want the data. The second thing is they're good at using software. So whether it's a Workday that they use for their full-time employees or Salesforce for their CRM, if you ask them what other tech do they use in their company, they're going to come up with three or four other great platforms that they use. So they've already understood the value of the data, the system of record, the technology, everything else. And so they're already there, if you will, in terms of the need for technology. And a lot of times what we'll see is, like, we had one company we were talking to, a healthcare company, about 2,000 employees. They have like 400 freelancers. So it's a big spend as a percentage. And these are high level people. They're doing clinical trials. They're doing, a lot of research and development. So they're making six figures, but they're contractors like 1 or 2 years. And they have them all over the country now because of COVID. People moved out of this, happened to be in California. They moved to Oregon, they moved to Seattle, they moved to Nevada. And they brought in a new chief people officer, and he's like, I don't even know how much I'm spending. I don't even know if we're compliant in New York. I've got two people in New York. I didn't know that they were there. And so, like, the organization has adapted, hired people all over the place. They've moved all over the place. And now you don't even know if you're compliant because all of a sudden you thought you were compliant in California. You have 20 people in New York. What do you do? And so, what he's looking for in that case was consolidate all the information, have a partner help him with the classification that is really smart about it, that has a national footprint, and kind of clean it all up, streamline it, consolidate it, and then be able to be intelligent when the CFO says, why are we spending $200,000 more this month in contingent labor than last month? So those are the kind of companies that we really like because, again, they want technology, they know how to use it. And then the second area, which is really interesting, I think, is the companies that are very focused on the talent and the talent experience. So they probably work in an area where that talent is hard to find, and it could be for a variety of reasons it's hard to find. And so when they find someone good, they want to make the onboarding really fast and streamlined. They want to have a great experience. They want to obviously pay them on time if there's expenses being paid, as well as other stipends that they're done correctly. So the complicated nature of the payments has to be done properly. And they want a provider like ourselves who has a US-based customer contact center, who has a very, very fast and responsive customer success team because they're very concerned that the talent will leave or not join in the first place because of the friction with onboarding and management of the talent, which they've had in the past because they've done things manually. And we had one very large customer in the retail segment where literally the HR director was adding people to payroll on her weekends. They would email her, hey, add these 4 people, and she would be entering into their payroll system that really wasn't meant for flexible workers on her days off. And so when we showed her our onboarding where the talent does everything themselves, I mean, it blew her away. And that's not like leading edge technology. It's good technology and it's really well set up and it's very customizable. But some of these companies are doing things in ways that are so antiquated because they're trying to use the wrong system. And so there's a pain where that is very sort of personal to the HR person. Like she's like, hey, I love you guys. I got my weekends back. And so that makes you feel really good too when you solve that issue.
Yeah, no question. And so looking at it, the change towards this is the clients have gotten more savvy and looking to utilize technology. They use it in many different areas. And so this is a way to solve it in this area. But the technology has also probably changed from
That's right.
as well, so that it's a lot more user friendly, it's easier, it's mobile, it's all of these things that allows for more self-service than needing someone to call or someone to help them on board, right? And both sides, be it the manager has more of control to self-service and the workers too. So they're doing more of the activities versus it going to a service offering, let's call it, or a service provider who's kind of having to push it into different systems, right?
Yeah, that's right. And so one of the analogies I use is like airline reservations. You used to call American Airlines, talk to the person. Well, do you have an aisle seat? Where's the, closest window? Like you go through all these things booking a ticket. Can you get a better price? Blah, blah. Now you go online and it's much easier to see all the options yourself, right? You go to Expedia, you can see 10 different airlines. You can pick out all the seats you want. You can see what's available. You can check out the times. You can be like, no, I want to arrive an hour later. So it's much better if you could give the customer the visibility into the data so they can make their own decisions. And then once in a while, if they need help, we're there to create a custom report or whatever. But we've built BI into our platform so it's native, so they can run a real-time report up to like 5 minutes of like what did they spend this month on their labor force, and they can do it by department, by project number, whatever it is. And so it's easy to use, yet gives them that instant visibility where they can create their own reports, they can save them, they can export them, they can do anything they want in the system. They don't have to ask a third party, they don't have to go to a different website. So it's all right there in front of them. And again, that organization that knows how to use data like that, that's our best customer because a lot of times they're very frustrated because they're not getting that data from a service provider, or they may have 10 service providers and they have to like mash it all together, and someone has to do that work, which they usually don't have time for. So they're always getting like a piece of the story, not the whole story.
Mhm. And so what you see and what your platform does, but what you're seeing this trend in the industry is towards technology that helps with the make it easier for managers to be involved self-service, workers to onboard themselves almost self-service like, but have support in
Right.
the back if needed. And then really that continues on to the time tracking, the payment. So in the providing that EOR service as well in a very tech forward manner, because in a lot of cases the workers are pre-identified or the client knows who they're going to be hiring, and you just make it frictious, frictionless
That's
to
right.
onboard, to pay and manage, right? And it just provides the woodwork as opposed to all of the touch points it used to be.
Yeah, and one of the sort of our core concepts when we started was we wanted to build all the technology ourselves. And we wanted to do that so that we could react very quickly and correctly to the market needs. So some of the customers will say, can I get, can you add this field to the reports? And we're like, at first we said, sure, we'll add it for you. And now we enable them to add it themselves. So they can go in, add that column. Let's say they want to track PO numbers. They can add it themselves. So what we've done is create the ability to customize your own experience. And you can only do that if you build the software. You can't do that if you're going to a third party, let's say maybe a time and attendance system or scheduling system, and say, hey, can you do all these things? And they'll be like, well, maybe we'll think about it and we're going to charge you for it. So we want to control the stack. So we build all of the software, we integrate it all, we do all the workflows, all of the data work. I mentioned we integrated a BI, interface. We do all of that work ourselves. And the other thing which it allows us to do is to embed compliance from day one. So from the moment they get a welcome letter or an offer letter to the time that they're terminated or end their assignment, we can embed compliance into every aspect of that. And because we do a lot with hourly, we have a lot of workforce management customers who use the scheduling very intensely. And so when you're scheduling somebody, as you know, if you do 10 hours in California on a day, you got to put in overtime, right? So all of that stuff is inserted automatically through our compliance layer that runs throughout our system. Because what we noticed was if you're, let's say you're a staffing company using a third-party scheduling tool, well, you really can't control whether they do a good job of that or not in terms of inserting breaks, right? And if you're not an EOR and you're just doing the software, conversely, you don't really care about compliance because you're a software maker. You're not an EOR, you're not taking responsibility. And so we felt like there was sort of this gap, and the customer was losing because they're like, well, wait, who's responsible for putting in the breaks in California? And one company says they are, the company says they are, and we say, no, we're responsible for everything. So we make sure it's done right. And you have one partner to talk to ensure that. And so this idea of we are a software company and a tech company, 100%, but we're also a great EOR and payroll and payments company, which includes that compliance layer. So putting that together into one platform is kind of our go-to-market. There's not a lot of companies doing it that way. And so that's kind of like our unique selling point, which is we go in and say, we're going to give you the best technology and the best EOR experience.
So, what are the obstacles to implementing a technology first approach to this? Because companies do have this, they haven't migrated all to technology only, and there's some hesitation to. What have you seen as some of the obstacles to that?
So I think traditionally in the old days, you talk about services, let's say a staffing company or staffing agency, there was comfort in someone to do it for you, right? Okay, I'm going to tell them I need to hire 50 people and they're going to do it for me. Once you've done it, you realize that you still have to be pretty involved and you got to do a lot of work. But it's nice to have sometimes people just helping you do stuff because you don't have enough resources yourself. So what I would say is that company has to make sure they allocated enough resources to do it yourself, to take the data and execute on that data, create actions out of that data. Not a lot of time, but it is some time to do it yourself, if you will. I think time has proven that if you invest a little bit up front, you get great returns later on, but you still got to do a little work yourself. The second thing I would say is that if you are relying on agencies to do your sourcing, there's nothing wrong with that. If you want someone to recruit people for you, and we're happy to take those workers that were recruited by a staffing agency and put them on our platform, it doesn't matter to us, right? So I think it's just understanding how you use the different offerings in the market. So if you say, listen, I'm a biotech company and I use this agency to hire my engineers or my scientists or whatever. Well, we're not trying to replace that, right? We're just trying to make everything that happens after you select them much easier for you and frankly, less expensive. And so that's really, I think that what we do in terms of education is here's how you accomplish your goals and put us together with other services that you need to use and should use and work.
Hmm.
Because
So,
in the past, sometimes if they had a very large staffing agency, a very large staff, it was, hey, we do everything, right? We do RPO, we do sourcing, we do any kind of like payrolling. We have an MSP and a VMS. Like it's kind of a one-stop shop fits all. And a lot of times that doesn't work anymore because things are too nuanced. And so, we're happy to work with a company that has an MSP, but they don't want to use it for these kinds of employees. We do that today. And they sit sort of side by side, right? And it's no different than how we think about the full-time payroll. We don't go in and say, kick out ADP for your full-time employees. That's not our focus, not our specialty. And so I think it's just understanding how to match up these different products that are out there.
Well, it's been interesting because we see the trend towards massive amount of spend happening in what we as an industry is calling SOW.
Right,
You also can call it rogue spend if you're so inclined, basically because it's not going through the program. But that catch-all of the statement of work is basically talent, either, the traditional definition would be it's a managed service, right? That is got guaranteed services, fixed price often, etc. But what you're finding is a lot of the talent that probably should have been in the program is now saying, well, no, I want to be more direct with my customers because the talent is choosing to be independent these days. And they're getting contracts signed directly with the organization, and then it becomes generally unmanaged in a lot of cases,
right,
right? Through a
right,
procurement system, maybe, but not really any compliance, or it's just, it's got a legal contract signed, if that, maybe, and a PO, and then the work starts and it's a lot easier. So, I'm a big believer of the managers aren't here to do internal processing roles. They're here to do a job. And if
right,
this you can create less friction in this process, they're always going to take the path of least resistance. So we're seeing a massive growth in the SOW space where often because it's avoiding the programs and the the layering of cost, etc. Um, what are you seeing in that space, and how's this like tech kind of self-service tech enablement solving for it?
Yeah, so SOW is a really big focus for us for those reasons that you stated. And what we see is that we think with an offering like ours, where we make it easier to go direct to the talent, for the procurement people, the HR people, and the line managers, it's a win-win really for everybody. And it's not so much about, again, trying to displace the MSP. It's the company saying, I've already decided I don't want to do it that way, or the line manager saying that. What I want is still a way to track my spend, to report on it, to organize it, to budget against it, all of those things which we can do in our platform. And so we think it's a win-win really for the organization because it'll cost them less, it'll be more flexible, faster, and reduce those friction points with the talent, which is, like you said, very important. Like you got a network engineer, you want them to start in a week, you got to onboard them in 2 days. Like we can respond that fast. And so I think that's a big area where this type of technology product that we've developed, this platform with our services, let's say for the onboarding, whatever it might be, is very appealing, because there is so many of those situations where the manager's like, I got a person, I got to get them working and get them paid before they go somewhere else. I don't want to lose them. It's hard to find these people. We're really enabler of that speed. And I think that's the area where there's lots of potential for organizations. And like what you said with SOW is correct. That term means a lot of different things now. But what we see it really meaning is I have someone I want to hire as a contractor, not an internal employee, a full-time employee. How do I do it compliantly as quickly as possible with the least amount of time for me and time for the talent?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
then, where
and
the
so
organizations get involved, purchasing or procurement or HR, or the CFO says, wait a minute, you just can't go out and hire all these contractors without a budget approval, without tracking it. We don't have reporting on it. And that's where things get, a little dicey in these larger companies. They just lose track of it. And that's what problem that we can certainly solve.
yeah. Um, in terms of, the some of the best practices when it comes to moving something like this forward, you know, we've talked about things being in different types of systems, in different locations on desktops and laptops and top drawers, contracts sitting on desks. how do you start to move from that environment to a, you know, simplified self-service solution?
So one of the things I've noticed, people are just so busy now, that it's hard to get enough discovery time with them. So in the old days, if you're selling enterprise software, you'd have a 2 hour discovery session with somebody, right? And you get all this information, you could tailor a solution, blah, blah, blah. Now you might get 10 minutes, 15 minutes sometimes. Maybe it's a couple of emails. And you need something to go on to understand their pain, how they're doing it today. And so what we're really focused on is trying to get enough time for discovery, to understand when they talk about our reporting doesn't really work. Well, show us your reports. Like just do a screen share and show us what your reports are and why there's a problem. And so when we've been able to do that, and the organization usually gets a couple people on the call and says, okay, show me the reports that are problem. Show me the invoices that are problem. We just had one call a couple of days ago. It's quite interesting. They were getting PDF invoices. So they wrote a Claude program to pull out all the information to create a report. And I was like, are you kidding me? Well, good for you. You figured out how to use Claude to do that, but why on earth would you get PDF? It doesn't make any sense. And so anyway, it's stuff like that that you really have to kind of get into the details, because sometimes we say, of course we can solve for that. It's already solved. It's already everyone, no one does that in our platform. It goes right into the BI tool, right? And so it's stuff like that is really important, is getting maybe a layer below, like, oh, our systems are a problem, or the reporting, it doesn't really match, like really understanding their processes today. And they were using kind of a payment agency, I would describe it. Not really a small company, but like they just didn't have decent reporting and analytics. Um, and so it's really understanding that. That's the key. If we can get a couple people who are the stakeholders on the Zoom call with some examples, we can come back very quickly and be like, yeah, we're the right partner for you. And so our approach is, we have calls sometimes they say, we really want you to source the people. And we're like, yeah, we just don't do that. You need to go somewhere else. Sorry. We don't want to take business that we're not the best absolute product for.
So what you're saying is have your ducks in a row, let us help you, or have
Right.
experts come help get your ducks in a row, get data organized, and then start to evaluate products out there.
That's right. Like be able to have, ideally your wish list with some examples that you can go to someone like us, and you should talk to a couple people and say like, okay, here's what I'm trying to solve for, and look at different options. What we have seen is that we, from what we hear from the customers and prospects, is our ability to customize the software, the reporting, even the user interface for like time tracking and stuff is the best they've ever seen. And so one of the things that, our sort of mantra is make it all common on the back end, but make it look customized for the customer, right? Make it, okay, you want PO numbers here, we can do that. You don't want to track location on the GPS verification with the mobile app. Okay, we can take that off. Like make that experience that they're going to be able to present to their managers and their talent customized for what they need. Because, I think as you probably have seen in software, everyone has sort of this generic software, and then the ones that can customize it and create a real tailored experience over time evolve into the winners, right? And that's kind of where we are now. I think it's like having that customized experience is super important to people. They don't want to have to do a lot of work on their end, nor should they, in terms of customizing their own reporting, for instance.
So in terms of, looking at platforms and where the software has come to, a lot of platforms out there are allowing for the clients to self-service, customize the experience to
Right.
meet their workflows and needs and custom needs, right? And
That's right.
so
Yeah.
that's something to really look for when you're evaluating platforms as well.
And it's interesting when you play around with Claude or ChatGPT, you can ask it to customize a workflow for reporting or scheduling or something like that. And what it will do is it will find some really interesting, cool ways of doing it, but you just can't plug that into, let's say ADP or something, right? Like it doesn't really work that way yet. So what this company did was they built Claude and they had to run it through Claude, take the export from Claude, and then run it through another system, a lot of manual processes. So it solves one problem, creates two more problems.
Yeah.
Right? What we're about is no, you tell us how you want to customize. If you can't do it yourself, we'll help you do it, or we'll do it on the back end if we have to. And we'll give you that experience before we even launch with you, because also making a good first impression on your talent is critical. If you have a large workforce, the change management can be very difficult for them, going from one system to another. So making that change management as easy and positive as possible, which is like this is going to be better than what you had before. That is really critical. We didn't really talk about that, but we've seen that a lot where you have a large workforce, especially if they're in the field and they're not and they're doing task-based work, disrupting how they work, disrupting how they punch in their time, disrupting how they do take vacation time. It's really bad. And it just generates a lot of ill will by the field teams, by the talent with the company. And so that's another thing that I think companies should pay attention to is this a net positive for the talent or a net negative in terms of making this change?
100%. So, Glenn, I have to thank you again for taking time out of your schedule. And I know we could probably talk
We could
longer.
go for hours, yeah.
There's lots of things, and I'd still love to ask about this because I think, there is a trend to, uh, from where we've went over the last 30 years of, right, trying to solve the problem of finding a person and matching a job and getting them onboarded to do the job. We've put a lot of layers in between that, and I think there's the trend to now bringing it back to, can we create an easier
That's right.
experience for that to happen, especially if we already know the talent in a lot of cases, which we're finding a lot of organizations do know the talent that they're needing. And it's a matter of, let's get them on and working and make it that a seamless self driven experience, right? But then give the enterprise the data they need to make better decisions and ensure compliance within it. And so, to finish off our conversation, I always ask, you know, this has been kind of a broad topic, and it's always scary when I'm a program lead or I'm a finance director or I'm in HR and I'm starting down this path of saying, okay, that's enough. I want to centralize this through technology, or I want to change from my decentralized staffing and VMS, MSP type with lots of layers. I want to simplify this. How do you start, right, to move this forward, right? Other than just calling you, like what are
Well,
the
yeah,
things they can start to do?
what I would do and why I love your LinkedIn group is like I would consult a group like your LinkedIn group and say, here's what I'm trying to accomplish. Who should I be talking to? What are these companies called? Where should I spend my time? And really get peer input. Because if you just Google freelancer management or contingent management, you get 20 companies that have nothing to do with what you're looking for half
Yes.
the time, right? They're doing some niche or they're doing this or that or whatever, but you're like, oh, that's not it. That's not it. So use the peer groups, like your group, which is, I think, very targeted to get an idea of what do you even call these companies that do this? Who should I talk to and start to educate yourself? But it's very hard to do it from a cold start. And that's why I think using a group like yours would be perfect.
No, perfect. Well, thank you. And thanks again for the conversation. I do believe in this as things are moving so fast. And
Yes. Yeah.
you did mention AI. I always, there's always an AI component to every new conversation I'm
We'll have to
having.
do this again and talk about AI. There's a whole nother aspect. Yeah.
Yes, but
Yeah.
in the world that we live in, AI inconsistencies create a lot of havoc. And so,
Yeah.
having it in a very structured format within products that are doing this for a living is probably a best practice that I truly believe in at this point in time. So, we will come back with an AI discussion probably at some point in time. But thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. This has been a great conversation.